Denim Couch Podcast. Ooh, whoa, ooh, whoa.
The 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s with Steph with an F.
Hi guys, welcome to the Denim Couch Podcast, where we chill on this denim couch and talk about the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. I'm Stephanie Tanner. Welcome. Hey guys, it's Stephanie Tanner with the Denim Couch Podcast. Today's episode is with Lavelle Kirby, and what a fun guy Lavelle is. He is a character, and I had a great time interviewing him, and I'm looking forward to this interview. So he just kept cracking jokes and had lots of funny things to say during the entire interview, so I edited out a lot of my really loud laughter. So it'll be nice and clean and without my cackling. This week, I really tried to implement what I talked about last week, which was controlling more of the media that I intake. So specifically YouTube, I'm trying to not just click on things that are intriguing to me and instead watch things that were meaningful to me at one point or meaningful to me and my kid, and things that don't drain me. So I felt a little better this week about what I consumed, and I just want the things that I'm watching and consuming to be things that I want to be like, as the things that I watch and take in and ultimately end up becoming me in a sense. So, and then also this week, I've been reading a wonderful book, and in that book, people talk about this wonderful man who was a heart surgeon, and he was a part of many organizations. Let's just say he was an incredibly busy man, and being a heart surgeon, of course, he's away from his family a lot. But his family, I think he had something like 9 children. The majority of the story is in the 50s and 60s, and he was a heart surgeon discovering new things with other people, a big part of major cardiovascular organizations and colleges, and he was a big part of these very important groups. His family said that they felt like they did get a lot of time with him, and it was because whenever he was with them, he was fully present. He was fully invested in them at that time that he was with them, and that he wasn't actually gone much, because when he was there, they got all of him. And that just stuck with me this week. It is something I'm not good at. My brain is all over the place. And since I've had my son, I've been trying to do this more and be fully present when he's around and engaged in whatever activity he's doing. And I don't think this needs to be all day, all the time, because that's quite frankly a lot. And I don't believe that my kid needs me to entertain him 24/7. However, when I'm done working and when it's just the two of us and when I have a couple hours a day to spend time completely fully present with him, I need to do that. So reading this book was really motivating, and I love that he was able to accomplish so much with his family as well as with work because he was fully present. I'm really excited for this interview, and I hope you're entertained. I was entertained. Lavelle is very entertaining. So here we go. And my first question for you is, can you tell me a little bit more about your name?
Well, there were 2 of us in the same school. I was a senior and she was a sophomore, and we both had the same name, Lavelle. Other than that, nobody. They'd call us out for one of us, and we'd both show up at the office. I was in the same grade with her older sister. My mom and dad were arguing over what I should be called, and they both had a friend that name was Lavelle, and so they named me after that person. After my mother passed away, and I'm 76, and so I got it a couple of years ago, I found the picture of the lady I was named after. There's 2 ways to spell that name. It was spelled correctly for the other young lady that was in school, and it was spelled wrong for me. It's Lavelle. E-L-L-E. Small letters except for the first L. For the male, it's a capital L, small a, capital V, small E-L-L-E. The male has a capital V in it, and that's the difference between the two. My mother apologized, but I was the biggest kid in school, so it didn't matter.
What was life like back in the 60s?
Well, I graduated high school in 1960. I had worked as a caretaker for a while, and then we were building a chapel out there in Sandy where I was born and raised, and I took over all of the making of the mortar and supplying the brick and the block for all the bricklayers that was working on the chapel, and that taught me a little bit more about how work really was. It was tough. There's a lot of good things. You take off with your buddies and go out and do things like shoot off firecrackers in January or something like that, stupid. In the very first part of 60, we had a brand new fire, or a brand new building that went up, and so to do that, they had a big bonfire. They built this great big tall teepee with dead trees and anything they could find to put in there, and they were going to light it up one Saturday. And we worked on Saturdays, and so me and my friend, I don't know if you know where 33rd South is or not, but that's about halfway into Salt Lake from Sandy where I lived.
Okay.
And you could see that big fire from all the way up there down to where they were. So things like that were kind of neat to do. The whole thing was almost 25 feet tall. Put out quite a flame. And
what were some popular activities?
in the earlier years, when we first moved out to Sandy, there was a lot of square dancing. A lot of people played cards in like canasta or those, not poker or anything like that, but card games. And they would take turns. We always had a big blanket and a frame up in the living room, and Mom would work on that, and some of the sisters would come over during the daytime, and our job was to stay out of the house. For us kids, most of us were my age or graduation. I was the next to youngest kid in our class. The kid down the street was 10 days younger than I was, and so we'd go sand jumping. We knew where there was a sand pit, and you go up sand jumping, jump off the side of the edge of the mountain there down into a big sand pit, 20 feet down, causing trouble. You know how teenagers are. During Valentine's Day, people we really knew, like my next door neighbor, would put a Valentine's card on the step on the porch, and would put fish leader onto it with tape on the back. And when they'd bend over to pick it up, would yank it. And we kept doing that. They had a really loose string, and we'd get that tied to a fence post on one side of the ditch, and we'd go across the street to the other side of the ditch. And when a car came along, we'd pop it up about windshield height, and people would slam on their brakes. But of course, you got to remember, though, I lived in the country, and if you got a car once an hour, you're doing good. I didn't ever do this, but we had friends that they were starting a new housing up on the hill from us, and so they went on the dead end part of the street, put straw and everything out, and lit it up on fire. With that, the police department, the fire department comes whizzing up there, and then they got on the other end of the street where everybody had just passed to go down to the fire, and put out straw and everything out there, lit that up, and we left. So the fire department and the police are stuck in the middle. Now, I didn't do that one, but those are just some of the stupid things we did. We were crazy kids that knew all the back ways in and out of places, so we very seldom got caught either.
What did you do for fun in the 60s?
We played a lot of church ball. The neighborhood kids would get together and play softball occasionally, and that was about it. I mean, there was the rest of the school activities. I didn't get into many of them because we had cattle to take care of, and so when the kids were getting off at 5 o'clock, I was out milking cows. So I didn't get into any of the high school type stuff. So those are just things that we did on days or later on in the day when the sun stayed up late. My mother was born and raised in Delta, Utah, and when she was born, they had 80 acres. It's 160 acres. They had two sections of alfalfa that Grandpa raised, and then he sold it to all the neighbors for their cattle. And so Mom was born on a farm. My dad, he was born, and back then they used to keep the mom and the baby in the hospital for 3 to 4 weeks. And the day after my dad was born, his father came up to the hospital and looked at him and went in and told Grandma, "That's not my kid. I'm out of here." And they never saw him again. And so till he was a few years older, it was just him and his brother and Grandma. There was my dad and his older brother and my grandpa's daughter, and then Grandma and Grandpa had another child. No, they were not farmers. Grandpa was a blacksmith, and my mom and Dad met because Grandpa went down to Delta to be a blacksmith down there. But it was it wasn't anything real big. We had enough to keep us going in food and stuff. Dad went out there one day to milk the cow. She kicked him 10 feet out of the barn and broke 3 ribs. So you had to be careful. You just kept busy out there.
Do you have any favorite memories from the 60s?
Of course, Saturday mornings was always a triple showing at the movie theater. What they did is they'd have a 2 movie. They always had a 2 movie, and it was I think like 10 cents to get in, nickel to get in, and every once in a while they'd throw in another movie, and so we'd go down and watch those. There was no popcorn or sodas like in the theaters now, or then like there is now. There was a drugstore. We could go to the drugstore and we could get us a popcorn, a soda, go to the movie, and still have a nickel left over. And then we used to go into Salt Lake and we'd just look up at the sky. Have you ever seen the Walker Bank building? They've got that big thing up there, and it'll turn red or blue or white for weather.
Yeah.
We used to get down on Main Street and just start looking up at that and just point. Nothing in particular. And then back away and watch everybody try to figure out what we were doing. Got looking around, seeing what they could see, and there was never anything there. And I still do stupid things like that. I had some as little kids, but I don't know if they turned out to be favorites or not because I used to get spankings for climbing up on the roof of the house at the age of 3. I think one of my real favorite memories was when we moved out to Sandy. My dad was the janitor for the Sandy Recreation Hall, which belonged to the church. When they built that chapel back in the 1800s, they had built a chapel and then put a little bit of ground in between it for parties, barbecues, whatever, and then built a rec center. And the rec center was big enough it was a full-size basketball court. They had a movie projector in it with a screen up on the stage. They had all the stake activities. They had ward dinners. They had dances. And they had stake conferences, which we hated because on Friday nights, they would have a big function or a Saturday night. Then we had to stay there and clean up after that and then set up all the chairs on this full-length basketball court. The part I really liked about that was 3 o'clock in the morning. We lived about a mile from there, and we would walk home. And those are my favorite times. That's really probably the only times I really had with my dad, just the 2 of us. And it was fun. And my dad passed away when I was about 25 years old. So being with Mom in the old house when they were putting up the blankets and, things like that. So riding the horses, we had a guy cut their alfalfa in the back, and he did it with a couple of horses, and he'd let us ride on the horses while he rode on the cutter and would go around till he got it all cut. That was fun. Awesome. But, there's just a lot of little things that you forget a lot of them after a while.
What was the style like back in the 60s? What did you wear?
I always wore Levi's and shirts with, as a little kid, I had a plastic pair of suspenders with these little red and green and yellow colored pieces of glass on them to make them look cool. That's what we did as little kids. In junior high, Levi's were still approved. However, when you got to high school, they weren't. In high school, you had to wear a pair of slacks, nice shirt, nice shoes. The girls could wear a dress or a skirt and a blouse. If there was going to be a dance or something that they were going to be decorating for the last half of the day, they could bring Levi's and stuff to change into. High school was in Sandy on 90th and State Street. One young man lived out in Draper, and Draper was all farming country, as it still is today. He missed his school bus, so his mom drove him in, and she dropped him off in front and took off and went home, and they wouldn't let him come to school because he had a sweatshirt that had been cut down the front so he could get it on and off easy. I had a pair of nasty, smelly Levi's and his cowboy boots. So he had to wait till his mother got home. He called her. She brought him clean clothes up to school. I waited for him to change and then took his dirty ones back, and then he could go to classes. The dress was pretty casual except going to school, and you didn't have to wear a tie, but you had to wear a nice sports shirt and a pair of slacks, no Levi's, like I say. And because I started driving when I was 12 and I was 15 in my senior year, 15 and a half in my sophomore year, and you could get a driver's license at 15 and a half back then if you had driver's ed. My driving instructor in the school knew me quite well and knew that I worked at a place where I drove a 1-ton truck. The lady had big Cadillac, and she had Mercuries, and she had Jaguars, and she had, you name it, she had, and I was driving all of those. Plus, I was driving my dad's car out in the back of the hayfield that he never found out about. So I've been driving a long time, so they let me drive from the school across State Street, which was the major north-south highway, over to the training area, and I got out of the car and into the back seat, and then all the others drove, and then when it was time to come back, I got back in and drove across, and when he felt that the others were good enough, I sat in the back seat the whole time. I never drove while. I ran across my first set of power brakes. It was in a Cadillac Eldorado. I'd like to put me through the windshield.
What made you happy back in the 60s?
These are kind of stupid things, but was in school. I had to take a half a year of junior English, and they had been doing Moby Dick, and they were halfway through studying Moby Dick, and so I asked them, do I have to do Moby Dick? Because I wasn't here for it. And he said, nope, you got to do it too. And I said, okay, which I never did do. When it came time for the test, I just didn't go to school. So I got in there, and he says, you're going to have to come back. The next day I went in, and I said, I didn't even come to school. And he said, well, you're going to have to come in and make it up. And I said, okay, I'll be kind of busy here for a little while. I'll come and do it. Well, about 2 weeks later, and he wouldn't give out the test to the other kids until I took the test. And in that particular classroom was the main room, and then there was another room right between that and his office. Well, he said, here's the test, go in there and take it. So I went in and sat down at the table, and I was like, now what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I looked up, and there's the answers to the test. So you know who got a good score on the test? I did. I had some really good teachers. I had Mr. Swenson and then Mr. Dean. Mr. Dean had been a World War II B-25 tail gunner, and they'd crashed, and he had a real bad limp. But he was those two teachers. Mr. Swenson was a really good teacher, and Mr. Dean was. I was kind of happy about that. I was not an average student. I'm dyslexic on a scale of 1 to 10, about a 7.5 to 8. And so, I'm not the sharpest tack in the attacks. But, that's the way it happens sometimes.
Were you ever scared, unhappy, or anxious back in the 60s?
Yeah, I was. Not so much. After I'd been married for a few years and it wasn't working out, I had my ex-brother-in-law call up and say, you still don't want to fly? And I said, yeah. I said, the Army's looking for helicopter pilots. So I went back onto active duty and went to flight school. And you don't think too much about it because have you ever played, I can't remember the name of the games. You didn't pass go and you didn't collect no $200. You ended up in South Vietnam. And you don't think too much about it until you're coming in to land and you're flying down low and you see these big 500-pound bomb craters. And you get a little anxious, a little scared with some of that. Some of the first things we went out on, I flew helicopter gunships. And so they're going to be shooting at you and you're going to be shooting back. Of course, I have a lot more to shoot with out of the gunship than they have out of their rifle. But still, your anxiety levels get up there. Nothing really unhappy about any of it, but just really a little scared, a lot of anxiousness that went on during those days. I have one other thing that I was a little scared about. I was a little kid, and I had an M80. Fireworks, they used to be a lot stronger than they are now.
Okay.
Probably twice as strong. And I had it in a can. I reached back to throw it, and it exploded. Put a piece of tin right through my hand. And then the cops came out because the doctor told them it looked like it was a gunshot. So the cops came out to see what's going on. And that kind of shook me up a little bit. But a couple of days after that, I was still fine again.
How would you compare your childhood or teenage years to today's kids?
There is no comparison. I say that tongue-in-cheek. It depends on where you're from. I was born on a farm, and I see kids today that are out in the country that are born on their ranches and their farms, and they're always doing something, getting this done or doing that or taking care of this or cutting the hay or the weed or whatever they're doing. And so for that aspect of it, it's pretty much the same. City kids is a whole different story from what we were to what they do now. We didn't go around damaging people's property, and there's a lot of that goes on. We might have done some other stupid things, like who knows what, but we didn't do anything that caused damage, just to have some fun. So I think there is a difference. For the kids out on the farms, I think most of those are doing the same kinds of things that we did, and that's you're on the farm working all summer long. That's what you did. And it's not that the city kids aren't good. because I've seen an awful lot of them. We walk our dog out here, and high school is just across the street and a little to the west.
Mm-hmm.
And we go through there when they're coming to school, and you talk to them, say, hey, how's it going today? Oh, we're doing great. How are you doing? And so some of the kids are really good. I don't want to say they're all bad because they're not, but there are just a few that really cause a lot of hassle. And so there's taking care of the livestock, there's feeding them, graining them, cleaning the barns out, then get the manure and go spread it around in the hayfield or over in the orchard or where the garden's going to be. Plow and cultivate for the garden and plant and garden. And I think I ate more tomatoes than I ever picked. I go out with a salt shaker, sit in the middle of the tomato patch. Farm life can keep you busy.
How would you define happiness?
How to define happiness is when you bring new life in. The biggest happiness is the things that they've made out of their life and they're going to go on with their life and getting married to a good spouse and do the things that they do that they're supposed to do. That's happiness.
All right. Thanks for listening to Lavelle's interview. We've got 2 more interviews until we are done with the 60s. That flew by so quickly. I learned a lot about the 60s, which I'll get into in the 60s review episode. And we got some fun things planned for that. With that, have a wonderful week. I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Wait. You can't miss the embarrassing story of the week. No. Okay. It's that time. It's Steph with an F's embarrassing story of the week.
Okay, so this week's embarrassing story, I have one, but listening to Lavelle, I was reminded of all the dumb things I did as a teenager because he had lots of tricky, teasing stories. He was a little bit of a spaz, I would say, and liked to get into light amounts of trouble. And I felt I could relate to this in some ways. I really shouldn't mention cat food brownies or gorilla masks, wigs. I did what I could. And my friends got me back many times. In return, I was pranked as well, pranked with toothpaste Oreos, soy sauce Coke, and one that sticks out in my mind is prank asking me to prom, which freaked me out. And so we had a good time. It was fun. I do think when you're in small towns, you get creative, and you definitely, if you're like me, enjoy pranking. So I thought that was fun. I related to it. I do it every now and then. I did prank my husband. I told him I was going to get my hair cut, and I came back from work and styled this wig so that it somewhat looked real. And he believed me. He legit believed me, and he could not touch my hair because as soon as he touched it, he would know. And so he asked me if he could touch it, and I was like, "Oh no, I've got the product styled. I don't want you to ruin it. You can touch it later." I pulled it off for about 2 days. He found out. He figured it out. My head started to itch too much, but anyways, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Thanks for listening. I will talk to you next time. Bye.
If you came here for mental health help, please go visit your doctor. If you're looking for some mental health tips, Dr. Daniel Amen is someone I follow. I love what he has to say and offer. I think his website is brainhealthassessment.com, and he just has some awesome checklist items that go over brain health habits that you should be doing to have better brain health. I want to say there's like 5 to 10 items, and if you have those, if you're working on those habits and trying to improve them to improve your brain health, you'll also improve your happiness level, because brain health equals mental health. So keep your brains happy and healthy, And check out Dr. Daniel Amen. This is not sponsored. I just really like what he has to say, and I think it's really beneficial. I think it can help a lot of people. It's actually very matter of fact, kind of obvious, but yeah, we neglect so many of these habits daily. And I do feel like, if you're feeling unhappy, that may be one of the reasons you're unhappy, because you're neglecting your brain health, which is also your mental health. And yeah, trying to improve these habits could really help. So check him out. If you have any stories from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, please get in contact with me. Let's chat. I want nothing more than to chat about the past. I want nothing more than to chat about the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. If you have any specific questions that I'm not asking that you would like to know about these eras while interviewing these people, please let me know. I would love some advice, and I would love your input. So, what would you guys like to know?